Hey, this episode of The Majority Report is brought to you by SunsetLakeCBD.com. And Sunset Lake has decided for this Black Friday, they're going to do something really different. Sunset Lake CBD and The Majority Report are teaming up to turn America's most consumerist holiday into a fundraising opportunity for a great organization. And here's how it works. You visit sunsetlakecbd.com, and starting November 22nd, all CBD products are going to be between, you ready for this, 30 and 60% off. That means right now, folks, as soon as you hear this, they are available. Orders over 100 are going to receive a free jar of delicious CBD gummies, a $40 value for free. You do not need a promo code for these products. They are already discounted on the website. So check it out. This is a great company. They have been a great sponsor of this program. But beyond that, they're a movement partner, and their products have an incredible amount of integrity. You can see all of the third-party analysis of what's in there. They have great farming practices, great business practices, and they allow me to get much better sleep because of their tinctures. So in this sale, Sunset Lake CBD will donate 10% of their sales to GiveDirectly.org. It's an international anti-poverty organization that sends cash directly to people so they can choose for themselves how to spend the money with dignity in a way that best suits their needs and their lives. You've heard me talk about Give Directly in the past. It's one of my favorite charities just because there's a lot of data that shows if you give people living in extreme poverty money directly, they know how to spend it the best. And Sunset Lake came to us and said, we want to do this thing. And what charity should we choose? And so here's the deal. We at the Majority Report are going to match that 10% donation. So if folks buy $100,000 worth of Sunset Lake CBD product over the next couple until December 1st, they're going to give 10 grand and we're going to give 10 grand to GiveDirectly.org. Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned business. They have donated more than $16,000 this year to anti-drug war organizations, to animal shelters, union strike funds. We talked about the nurses up in Worcester, nature conservation, food shelves, and refugee resettlement organizations. Again, visit sunsetlakecbd.com to take advantage of these huge discounts and help Majority Report raise money for a great organization. Sale ends December 1st. Now, for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, November 22nd, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dr. William Blair, professor at Penn State University, on the record of murders and outrages, racial evidence in the fight over truth at the dawn of Reconstruction. Also on the program today, Joe Biden renames Jerome Powell to chair the Fed in a sop to inflation hawks. 5 dead and 40 injured after SUV drives into a crowd in Wisconsin. Texas abortion ban could be ruled upon any day now, and the U.S. makes it to a list of backsliding democracies for the first time. Meanwhile, leaked texts from January 6 organizers follow the president's lead. Protests in Europe as COVID suggests or surges and lockdowns return. U.S. COVID deaths top 770,000, with more than half coming in 2021. Lastly, Georgia Senate approves a gerrymandered map giving the Republicans 64% seats. In a state, Biden won with 49.5% of the vote. Yeah, the audio is sounding weird, apparently, guys. We're having a little bit of technical problems. Okay, are we back? All right, we're having a little bit of technical problems. Just to let you know what's going on. One of my kids was exposed to COVID at school, and so they can't go back to school. So I am trying to figure out, I'm working how to both, protect my child, who I think is fine. We've taken a couple of at-home tests and also take care of the children and also not expose anybody in this office in the event that somehow I got exposed from my son. So nobody's in the office. We're doing this sort of remote again. Just so you know, there's a chance that maybe tomorrow Emma will be here solo because of that, because welcome to it. I mean, I am boosted. Others are boosted here, but the real issue is that everybody's going away for Thanksgiving, and we don't want to somehow, we're doing the 1% doctrine here. Very low risk, I think, for anybody to be catching it, but the implications could be pretty nasty when we're talking about people going home to see their elder parents, et cetera, including mine. And so in an abundance of caution, that's what's going on here. So things are a little bit tricky on our end. But don't worry. We will get to it. We've got a couple of things, clips I want to play here. So the Kyle Rittenhouse fallout is happening. He was, as you know, found not guilty of all charges in his trial. Just to reiterate, I don't generally get too involved in criminal trials, just as a matter of policy. I've never done it, have really very little interest in doing that. It's quite possible the law is such that there is no accountability for somebody who decides to pick up a gun and go unilaterally decide that they're going to be policing a protest, and it ends up in people getting shot to death. And he killed them. He didn't murder them because that's a legal term, but he did kill 2 people. And when we talk about the idea of it being politicized, the right is freaking out apparently because people are upset about this hearing. Or I should say this verdict. Let's see what it means to politicize a guy who has killed 2 people, right? I mean, at the very least, it's a tragedy that everybody would want to move on from if you felt that Kyle Rittenhouse was, I guess, innocent or not guilty, however you want to pose that. But no, Kyle Rittenhouse, this guy has basically won the right-wing lottery. He will be a star in that world. For what? For killing 2 people and shooting a third. I guess presumably because it was a protest. But here it is.
Our documentary team was there in Kenosha when it happened. They've been there for days putting together an installment of our Tucker Carlson original series on this case. And they captured Kyle Rittenhouse's first moments outside the court today after being acquitted.
It's the stuff that keeps you up at night. Once you finally do get to sleep, your dreams are about what happened and you're waking up in a dark, cold sweat.
Yeah. You had dreams about what happened?
Every single night. It's quite scary actually because the dreams feel so real and they're not the same at all. They're all different. They're the different scenarios that run through your head during the day, like what could have happened. I'm alive, but what could have happened? Like what if I wasn't alive, or what if I did let Mr. Rosenbaum steal my gun? It's those type of dreams of the outcome of it's bad, but almost every outcome is either me getting seriously injured or hurt or dead. Those are just the dreams I have on a daily basis.
The defendant will rise and face the jury and hearken to its verdicts.
State of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
How do you feel, man?
The jury reached the correct verdict. Self-defense is not illegal. And I believe they came to the correct verdict, and I'm glad that everything went well. And it's been a rough journey, but we made it through it. We made it through the hard part.
And now he'll be feted throughout the right-wing media sphere. Now, when you see people about going on and on about politicizing these things, keep that in mind, and then watch what the defense in the Ahmaud Arbery case. This is the case of a man jogging through a neighborhood in Georgia and being shot by a couple of guys who just felt like he shouldn't be there. Here is the defense attorney in that case. The politicization, this is what you talk about trying to politicize a trial. The idea that that somehow society is the existence of, this guy's complained in the past of black preachers who are interested in the case, on and on. Listen to this defense attorney.
This is what a public lynching looks like in the 21st century, with all due respect. They don't have to have 10,000 people outside. They don't have to have 100,000 people outside. Perception is reality. They haven't put a podium up outside with a hangman's noose on it. Doesn't mean that this isn't a trial, despite the best efforts of this court. This isn't a trial that's been infected by mob violence of a woke left mob.
Remember, this is a story of a guy jogging, just like literally going out for exercise jogging, who was shot. And this defense attorney is talking about mob violence that is being perpetrated metaphorically upon his clients. That's what how politicization works here. And all right, we got to take a quick break. Our guest today is really appropriate for the moment, actually. Professor William Blair. He is a professor of Middle American history at Penn State University. He's author of The Record of Murders and Outrages: Racial Violence and the Fight Over Truth at the Dawn of Reconstruction. We will explain as we talk about that the import for today. But first, a couple of words from our sponsors. Got a couple of sponsors today, 3 actually. This is a great gift, and I appreciate it more and more, frankly. It's Storyworth. Storyworth is an online service that helps you and your loved ones preserve precious memories and stories for years to come. Every week what happens is Storyworth will email your relative or your friend, maybe your parents, cousins, whatever, and they email them what is in many respects sort of like an innocuous question, but it's very thought-provoking. And you can choose those questions, or they can just send the default one. Each unique prompt asks questions that you've never really thought to ask, like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done in your life? They'll say, like, what was your favorite car? I mean, and all of these questions manage to push a couple of buttons in people's heads, and they bring about all sorts of stories. And after 1 year, Storyworth compiles all of your loved one's stories, include photos, into a beautiful keepsake book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. So it's one of those gifts that is like great for the getter, but also great for the giver. And then you end up you can get more books, and you hand them out to you give them as gifts to your siblings, if it's about your parents, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it really is an amazing thing. And plus, it's a great way to stay in contact with people because you get to read their answers in real time as they build up. It is really, as you get older, like me, you start to realize the value and how much you don't know about your parents. You could do it for your kids too, if they're little kids. I don't know. I mean, you could theoretically send it to yourself as a way of prompting you and forcing you to write about memories that you may not remember years from now. I mean, I don't know if anybody does that, but it actually occurs to me that maybe that's a gift I can give to my kids. Anyways, these are really great gifts. Storyworth, you're giving those you love the most thoughtful and personal gift from the heart and preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/majority. Save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/majority. You will save $10 on your first purchase. It's a great, great holiday gift. Also, today's episode, sponsored by Honey. Everybody shops online. You've all seen that promo code field. If you're like me, you used to spend a lot of time finding those promos, but now you don't have to. Honey is a free browser extension. It scours the internet for promo codes, applies the best one, and then finds it to your cart. Honey supports over 30,000 stores online. Ranges from sites that have tech and gaming products to popular fashion brands, even food delivery. All right, here's how it goes. You're shopping on one of your favorite sites. You check out, the Honey button drops down. All you have to do is click apply coupons. You see it scroll through. Maybe it's scrolling through 3 or 4 or 6 different coupons to see if they work. Boom. They either find a coupon that works or they basically tell you you're getting the cheapest price. That to me is almost as much value because I cannot stand to leave a couple of bucks on the table. Everybody knows that about me. Honey has found over 17 million members, over $2 billion in savings. I literally used to teach Mila. She wanted to shop for clothes or whatever it was. You got to check for the coupons. Then we added Honey. Boom. She gets makeup. She saved a couple of bucks on makeup the other day. I saved, I don't know, 5, 8, I can't remember how much. $5, $8 on an air purifier. It's not bad. Completely free, and I didn't have to do any work. It just boom. It was it's almost like pulling one of those, I don't know, those jackpot things. What are those called? What are those called with the arms, the one-arm bandits? Slot machine.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's like a slot machine. Listen, if you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out on free savings. It's literally free, and it installs in a few seconds. And by getting it, you're going to be doing yourself a solid, and you support the show. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/majority. That's joinhoney.com/majority. And lastly, you know your closet well, but what does it sound like? Yes, I'm talking about your closet. Does it sound like you? Does it whisper your taste? Does it scream your taste? With Stitch Fix Freestyle, a shop that evolves alongside your taste, your closet will scream very much you. Introducing Stitch Fix Freestyle. It is a shop that is built just for you. Stitch Fix Freestyle is your trusted style destination where you can discover and instantly buy curated items based upon your style, likes, and lifestyle. They sort of have one of those algorithms where you can sort of basically go in there into Stitch Fix, thumbs up, thumbs down on all types of different clothing, and it builds essentially a store based upon your likes. I also find that it goes a little bit outside there too. So I find stuff that I never really contemplated that I would like. Doesn't matter if you're looking for a brand you love or you want to try a new one. At Stitch Fix Freestyle, you can shop a range of over 1,000 brands that are personalized to your size and to your fit. They have styles for workouts. They have styles for workwear, for lounging around the house, for a night on the town, all of it. Stitch Fix Freestyle has clothes for any occasion. Plus, there's no subscription required, and they offer free shipping, returns, and exchanges. Returns and exchanges with these guys are super, super easy. I bought a couple of things. I keep one. I send one back. Super easy. I forgot to check on what the brand is now, but I have here with me my baseball style zipper up cardigan, which maybe at one point I'll bring it on the show when we really get into the sweater thing. But it's a great piece, and it's a little bit of a push for me. I never contemplated a zip up cardigan style, but I love it. You can get started today by filling out your style quiz at stitchfix.com/majority. That's stitchfix.com/majority. Try Stitch Fix Freestyle, stitchfix.com/majority. Folks, all of these links will be posted in our YouTube and in our podcast description. You can check them out there. And also stick around at the end of the show today, because we have the first round of how far are you traveling to the live Majority Report show on January 16th. We will talk about that. But in the meantime, I want to welcome William Blair. He is a professor of Middle American History at Penn State University, author of The Record of Murders and Outrages, Racial Violence, and the Fight Over Truth at the Dawn of Reconstruction. Professor, welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
So I have to say, like, when I first saw the title of your book, I thought, like, oh, he's doing a record of murders and outrages. But you are not doing the record of murder. And that was already done about 150 some odd years ago. Mm-hmm. And it is, so let's, I want to talk about this in the broadest sense, as well as like some of the specifics. Let's just start with this. What is the Dunning School? Because so much of, as I've learned about Reconstruction, so much of it is submerged. As a kid, I learned nothing about this. Even in college, it just seemed to be completely glossed over. Now, fair enough. I went to college 30 some odd years ago, and maybe part of it was a function of Dunning School that was, the things were sort of under, I don't know, represented. But what is the Dunning School?
It's historians who, William A. Dunning was the major architect of it. And it was a group of historians, mostly out of Columbia University, who did state-by-state studies of Reconstruction. They started in the 1890s, basically, and then continued on up, meaning when they were publishing. And they continued on up into the 20th century. And they left an incredible influence on how the public and academics even understood Reconstruction. And this was mainly a white perspective. Some of them were Southern, but Northerners as well. And they put on a spin on Reconstruction that it was a bad time, that very little was accomplished, that Black freedom was, voting was basically a joke that was forced upon the South, and that it was an overreach of governmental powers that was conducted. And in my case, they pretty much denied the reality of racial violence, especially how extensive it was.
I mean, this is having spent enough time like interviewing people from who study Reconstruction era and talking about, and we'll talk more about this obviously, and you have really sort of unearthed the catalog, as it were. But that's extraordinary. I mean, do we have like a sense of what the agenda was, or was this just sort of like poor history? I mean, characterize both what you think their agenda was, if there was one, and then let's talk about the implications of that and how long those implications, how durable they were.
Well, I believe they thought they were doing scientific history. They came along during the Progressive Era and during the rise of professional history, which really didn't get going until the 1880s or so. They were archival based, so they would go in and look at government reports in particular. But if you come up in this moment during a time of scientific racism, when the white academy believes firmly in the inequality of the races, you're going to see different things in the record than we do today. So in answering your question, I think they were actually they thought objective and scientific, but they couldn't get beyond their racial blinders, and they would not accept some of the data that was just right in front of their faces. And as you say, they really endured until they began to fray until in the 1960s. There were a couple of people in the 1940s who were pushing back against a lot of their notions. But it really didn't get really displaced until the 60s and especially the 70s with brand new interpretations of Reconstruction. And then, of course, the magisterial book in 1988, which was a synthesis by Eric Foner that changed the way most people think about Reconstruction today.
I just like that concept is so extraordinary to me. I mean, because we have, you think about the constitutional amendments that came out of Reconstruction, basically provide, you know, the foundation of our modern society, at least in terms of, like, you know, when you look at like the Supreme Court and other, I mean, so much of what happens today is a function of Reconstruction, both its shortcomings and its successes. And I think in terms of the stories that it tells us, because, you know, right now we are dealing with a tremendous amount of, however you call it, fake news or misinformation, cross currents. People don't have faith in, and when one wonders what the relevance and what is problematic about this, all the answers are what are in the Dunning School and Reconstruction and your work. I mean, it really is, because the idea that this country operated, and I want to let you speak, but I'm just amazed by this. The idea that the country operated for 90 years, 80 years, under the notion that none of this stuff happened during Reconstruction is stunning.
Well, let me just create or characterize one thing differently. They would admit that there was violence, but they just would not admit, one, the extent of it. They would say it was exaggerated. They would say it was just, frankly, what is normal, so to speak, in American life at that time, and that radical Republicans were blowing it up because they wanted to get the vote for African Americans so that it could enrich their own party. So they were not ducking the entire issue of violence, but they were diminishing it. And then secondly, they were just making it a conspiracy theory of radical Republicans. And that held true held true in the literature and the public mentality for a good long time, which is frankly one of the despicable parts about this project that I did, that it really angered me.
Talk more about what it was, just the complete misinterpretation,
the misinformation campaign, if you will. That here were, you know, the book talks about why this record of murders and outrages existed, which was because it was being denied, not just by the Dunning School later, but at the time by Democrats at that point. And so this was supposed to be the proof by getting the Freedmen's Bureau to working with the freed people to collect data on the violence that was occurring. And it just was disheartening to me to see how even when they brought this material up, even when they introduced it into Congress, even when they showed in 1868 how it was affecting elections in 2 states for the presidency, it was still being denied. And the fact is that it was being echoed in that denial for, as you put it, another 90 or more years. That was disheartening. It really was.
My producer just IM'd me and said, this is the real intellectual dark web in many respects. But let's go back. I mean, tell us what was the Freedmen's Bureau, and I mean, or set the scene, I guess, where we have, Lincoln has obviously been assassinated. The radical Republicans have an agenda that they want to carry forward. Johnson is now the president. The Democrats don't want this agenda to go forward. They're trying to maintain as much white supremacy as you could politically in these southern states. What is the Freedmen's Bureau?
That was the first national welfare agency, if you will, if you want to think of it that way. They had the responsibility for helping Black Americans who had been enslaved to find their way to freedom. And to do that, they had a wide range of responsibilities: schooling, reaffirming marriages, churches, sometimes subsistence if people were starving, and things like that. Down the list at first, way down, was perhaps helping out with violence and law and order. But that grew as a responsibility only over the years. Just as they were on the ground seeing that there was a lot of violence happening around them. They being in all of these Southern communities, by the way. So out of 10 Southern states, you have Freedmen's Bureau agents posted there. They're the arm of the military. So most of them are captains in the US Army. And lo and behold, about after a year of seeing the violence, they just started collecting it. And with the help of higher ups like Ulysses S. Grant, who was the General-in-Chief of the Army, they started to try to make the case that law and order was not being preserved in the South. It was a very unequal situation, and Black people faced little justice in the courts.
Give us a sense of the dynamic, like how, I mean, it almost seems like at one point the Freedmen's Bureau became almost like a spy agency is the wrong term, but on some level for the Republicans in the Senate who needed, I mean, this is the thing that I think is sort of really fascinating. And, you know, I don't want to stretch this too far, but, you know, over the past, obviously the big piece of legislation we're dealing with in the country right now is the Build Back Better bill. And when the rating agencies came out and said, this is not going to impact inflation, it sort of created like at least a sense that maybe there was some pressure on Joe Manchin, who I don't think necessarily wanted to pass this bill anyways, but his public issue with it was sort of diffused in some way. I mean, that's the dynamic that was going on at that time, wasn't it? Obviously, the stakes of legislation are different, but they needed to make a rational argument, even though they knew that wasn't necessarily the motivation of their political opponents.
Well, what I liked was your surprise and marveling at the fact that the Freedmen's Bureau was operating in a way that maybe its founders weren't even, or wait, it's operating in a different way than you might want to think. Spies, you're right, too strong, except I characterize it in the book that they were operating as an investigative arm of the Republicans in Congress. And that is pretty amazing when you think about it, because they, meaning the Freedmen's Bureau, is under the War Department. And the War Department is an executive office. So all of a sudden, what you started to see were congressmen, Republicans especially, who were using the Freedmen's Bureau kind of like their eyes and ears. Spy may be too strong, but they were using it as a data collector. And it was really fascinating because it really was breaching the usual constitutional channels that we have.
What was the legislation that I mean, to the extent that, you know, the radical Republicans, you know, wanted this information, and I think they probably felt like it should just be out there, broadly speaking, but what was their legislative agenda that this information was going to help promote or showed the need for?
Well, they wanted to take some incredibly important, huge steps in American history. They wanted to enforce Black suffrage on the South when, frankly, it wasn't even in the North yet. There were 5 states in New England that did have African-American voting, but the broad swath of even Northern white people were not necessarily in favor of Black suffrage. They also wanted to put the military back into the South and negate all the governments that had been established and have them start from scratch. And those governments were going to have to put into their constitutions Black male suffrage again. So they were taking some pretty incredible steps. And the question is, how do you justify that? And how do you make it even constitutional? Because the Democrats were howling that this was, you know, not constitutional at all. It was an expansion of federal power that shouldn't have happened. Well, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution makes Congress have the responsibility to ensure Republican governments everywhere. That doesn't mean Republican Party governments. That means representative governments that practice equality before the law. And what they were able to do with this data, and they introduced it into Congress in February of 1867, they were able to say, look, fellas, A, it's not representative. They're not able to protect themselves or vote. B, there is no equal application of the law. Out of the data that they gathered, I think I showed in the book that out of roughly 3,000, almost 4,000 incident reports, and that meant maybe as many as 5,000 people, over a 3.5-year period, there were only 96 convictions, which is less than 1%, I think. I mean, it was just ludicrous. So if you have this data and you show the violence that's occurring, you can at least make the very strong case that, hey, we need to do some pretty hard stuff here. And you may not think it's constitutional, but we think it is because there's no equal application of the laws.
That clause incidentally came up on Friday on this program. We had a guest on about it as a potential mechanism for a Democratic Congress to help with the voting laws. And maybe even arguably things like gerrymandering, because there's a loss of a republic. I mean, we just today, Georgia just passed, or at least in the Senate, the 2 million new voters, almost 100% of whom are minority voters, and they have created 64% of the delegation is going to be Republican, and there's no new seats that are going to be able to be won by a person of color. And so, I mean, this is ongoing. That is not even for those people who like the sticklers and say we're not a democracy, we're a republic. We're not even at a republic at that point. And to be clear, that was the Military Reconstruction Act, right? That the wholesale changes that they want to go in and basically remake these states, which never came about.
Well, they did remake the states. All the states had to change their constitutions. What is disturbing to many of us, I know, is that the changes weren't permanent. It took another 10 years or so, but the South mounted what they called, the white South, excuse me, what they called redemption. I hate that term, but it's what they called it. And redemption meant anteing up the violence and even doing more in order to try to knock out Republican, and this time Republican Party governments, knock those out of the South and reinstitute white supremacy and Democratic machines. So they did succeed at first, but then there was a violent counter-revolution that came about.
So there really was almost like two different waves of violence that we saw. I mean, is that how to characterize? Will you describe those two different waves? And then let's talk about a couple of the incidents. I mean, you talk specifically in the book about stuff that happened in New Orleans and Louisiana and in Texas. In particular, you singled those states out. I mean, obviously there was more, but talk about the two different waves, and then let's get into some of the specifics.
Sure. Well, you can see violence at first, right after in Reconstruction, as being the early product of, we don't want to see changes happening, meaning you'd have local fights at the plantation level over even children. I never thought about how rape under slavery creates families, and then when you start to pull those families apart, who gets the children? So there was violence over that. There was violence over labor arrangements. There was violence that was, more spontaneous, perhaps, maybe not as planned. But by the time you hit 1867 and you get the Reconstruction Acts, you start to see almost a insurrection, or not insurrection, but guerrilla kind of warfare that erupts deliberately to affect political change. By the time you hit 1868, that's when you see the Klan at its most efficient, so to speak, and really using terrorism to try to keep Black Americans away from the polls and white Unionists who were voting with them, anybody who's a Republican Party member. And one of the things you can see in these, the records of murders and outrages, is just that rise of the Klan and how it starts to affect political change. Two states, Georgia and Louisiana, had a registered Republican Party majority for the presidential election. Somehow, The Democrats, they voted Democrat. Well, again, the record showed the terrorism that was employed that kept Black people from the polls. So then after this, the Klan was actually basically dissipated by 1870 and 71 in action by the federal government that passed the Klan Acts and went in and tried to ferret it out, especially in the Carolinas. But then by that point, really the federal government was eroding in its interest, I should put it that way, in the South, because there were more problems popping up in the North. The South looked like it had been reconstructed, meaning all the governments had been put back in. And that's when you started to see that awful word redemption occur, when white terrorists would, without being Klan-based now, but just organizing themselves in things called rifle clubs and other kind of white supremacist groups. That's when they used violence, intimidation, guns, and so on to try to keep Black Americans from the polls. And they eventually took over all of the governments in the South.
Let's talk about that first wave a little bit more. You provide 3 different tables in your book, and I don't know. I guess I'm not sure why this was the case for me, but you have one table of from 65 to 68 of basically all the incident reports, murder, physical assaults, verbal assaults. This is collected, we should say, by the Freedmen Bureau and transmitted ostensibly to the Republicans in the Senate at that time. And you look at the raw numbers, like murders, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 states or so, 1,600. And I was like, wow, 1,600 murders over the course of 3 years in 9 states. But then you look at like the number of people who actually vote in these states, and you realize like things were a lot smaller at that point. Like this is a lot of stuff going on, and it was not haphazard at all. These were all, in many respects, like political acts of violence.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you get to 1868. And one of the massacres that is in the book that is known in Louisiana and with some state historians, but really is not in the literature of Reconstruction, was deliberately political terrorism. It occurred in Bossier Parish and Cato Parish, Louisiana, beginning in late September, early October. And over the course of a few weeks, probably at least somewhere near 200 African Americans were gunned down. The 2 counties had something like a 4,000 some odd registered voters Black. 2 Black people voted in the presidential election. That's an eye opener. It was a real attempt to chill the voting at the polls, and it worked at that point.
So 4,000 voters, 200 people killed over the course of a couple of weeks, gunned down, and absolutely no accounting for this, right? I mean, it was barely even reported at the time.
It was barely reported at the time. Frankly, I have little confidence that we would know as much as we do about it were it not for the federal government. The Freedmen's Bureau were the first to report it, but I give the government some credit. Congress then conducted investigations because I really wanted to find, well, it's sort of self-serving, I should say too, because I wanted to know, well, how the heck did we lose Louisiana when we had a registered majority? They started to hold investigations. They had witnesses who would come up and actually testify. There were big, thick documents on this. And so thankfully, we do have a record of what happened. And it's really ugly. There were mass executions, people taken to the river in chains and shot down. I think I just want to stop there because I still get disturbed thinking about it.
Let's talk about, and that's at Red River, right? I mean,
Yes.
Let's talk about Texas, because in 1866, we have sort of similar dynamics that are brewing. And what did we see in Texas in terms of and we should say, and then maybe we'll move to Memphis too. It was these are the lesser known, lesser known massacres. I mean, I feel like we're just now, as a society, starting to reckon with what happened in Wilmington and what happened in North Carolina and South Carolina, and this is sort of almost like even more obscured in Oklahoma, more obscured.
No, you're absolutely right. In Texas was shocking to me. I'd never realized. We were the ones who did the tabulation. Every Freeman's Bureau reports, we had to comb through it for a couple of years to put the tallying together. And when we sat down and all of a sudden saw that Texas accounted for, I forget, almost 60% of all the known terrorism that occurred, it was just mind-blowing. I start the one chapter out talking about how Sheridan, the general who was in charge there, said that if he owned Texas and hell, he would live in hell and rent out Texas because it was just that violent. What you had there too was a power struggle that was going on between two white factions. And they were both one of them was trying to use black voting and the other one was trying to deny it. And those factions that had actually existed even before the war continued through the war. And then it was just a hotbed of violence. And Texas seems to have had a violent history, even in the antebellum period, that was beyond the pale of most of the states, I should say. And all that happened was after the war, you took natural violent culture, you stirred the political waters up, you heated it up, and all of a sudden it just boiled over like crazy. Had the most number of incident reports of any by far.
Where does, tell us about Memphis.
Memphis is a really well-known massacre, and frankly, it's part of the canon of Reconstruction literature, as well as the New Orleans Massacre. They did captivate the country in 1866, in May and July, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, or June. Don't hold me to that. But it was in 1866. Those two, because they were city-based, urban, they had newspaper reporters, they had people there, and it became widely disseminated. Almost like our current situations when we have these murders of Black Americans today. So everybody knew about these. In Memphis, it was actually mustering out former Union Black soldiers who angered the white community there because they looked too independent. And it caused a repercussion where people started to come in and started to shoot Black people down. Killed 40 some odd, raped maybe about 5 African-American women, and it made big headlines and even a congressional investigation across the North. That much has been well known, but the Bossier Massacre that I mentioned is only in regional studies. And in fact, in a couple of our really good big time newspapers, they don't even mention it as one of the massacres that occurred during Reconstruction. So you're right, we are still unearthing a lot of what happened.
And how, I mean, is there any way to measure? I mean, I can't imagine that there is, because it's not like, you know, people are being polling or being polled necessarily, but I mean, I'm just trying to sort of like, I remember when in the wake of 9/11, I think it was, we had there were snipers, there was a sniper team essentially in Washington, D.C. And I just remember like the impact of that, you know, in terms of like what it did for people's behavior and whatnot. I don't know that we, well, I mean, that we have I think it's hard for people in modern day, even when we see like the implications of the way that police interact with Black people. And I think Black people, you know, have a whole set of ways in which they talk to their kids about police and this and that. We can see the implications of those acts of violence. But the idea of 100 people or 200 people being shot down over the course of 10 days, we can see it out of 4,000 people, only 2 people be willing to go and vote. But is there any other sort of like indication? And maybe I guess in Wilmington you had people like basically leave town and hide out. But do we have any other ways of marking the efficacy of this type of political terrorism and what it did to these communities of Black people for how long?
You can attack some of it by voting records, but stunningly, when I looked at some of I have a very abbreviated period. I end my study in 1868. Even in Texas, still about 80% of Black people turned out to vote who were eligible to vote down in Texas, which I find remarkable, faced with what they were looking at with all the violence. It was actually one of the claims by the naysayers that said this violence could be happening. They said people were staying put and weren't leaving as much as they expected. They said, hey, if the violence was so bad, they'd be dispersing to the winds and leaving. But that's a hard thing to do when you're poor and you have to pay for a move and you have no community you know you're going to be welcomed in. Your question, though, gets at a root of something that is really befuddling, and I wish I had answers for, because in this case, historians have very poor methodology for finding trauma and figuring out what is the impact of trauma. I thought about that almost every day I was doing this project, that here are people who are marked and scarred by a terrible event. It had to leave a bad imprint, but I don't have records to be able to even say, what did it do? How did it affect them? And it's one of the untold parts of this project that sometimes, frankly, tears me up.
It also has to be, I mean, I imagine that working with this material as you have, I mean, really in one form or another for a couple of decades now, at least, I imagine. Do you have a vision of an alternate reality that takes place during that time in Reconstruction? I mean, it just seems like such a hard thing not to speculate about. Like, what if, I don't know, I mean, Johnson's not Johnson. If the radical Republicans had, I don't know, half a dozen more votes in the Senate, or, I mean, like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I actually wrote a piece about it a long time ago in what it's called Civil War History, one of the scholarly journals. And we had a panel that talked about what if, how would Reconstruction change? And my part of it, in my essay I wrote, basically said we needed military occupation, far stronger than what we had, far more soldiers, and for far, far longer a period of time. Our occupation of the South, which dwindled considerably by 1870s, did last, though, until 1877. So what does that work out to, like 12 years of occupation? And I was speculating it was going to take much more muscle, maybe for another 20, 30 years, to have made an indelible difference against white supremacy in the South and would have changed the story. The American appetite for that? It just wasn't there. There was no political will to do that. Think of how long we were in Afghanistan, not even anywhere near as long, and we eventually lost the political will there to stay.
Well, I mean, what accounts though for the? I mean, it's one thing to have not had the political influence and the outcomes on the South that we would have liked. But what accounts for not just the failure to impose a better situation or system or to protect Black people, but the massive success of the South to rewrite history and have it be so durable, right? I mean, like, and on some level, we're just seeing that reckoning now with the tearing down of these statues. It seems to me is really the first time that our society is beginning to sort of, even if it's almost more visceral than it is an intellectual exercise, to realize like something was revised about the reality that took place.
And we're back full circle to the Dunning School, aren't we? What started to happen around the turn of the 20th century was things like the Dunning School, movies like Birth of a Nation, and a whole genre of both history and pseudo-history that began to try to reforge good feelings between North and South. One of the things that happened was the erection of, this always blows me away, by 1914, the largest monument in Arlington National Cemetery, our national cemetery for the United States, the largest monument there, and still is, the Confederate monument that was put up in 1914. It's 30 feet high. So there was a process going on where white people reached across the chasm, the bloody chasm as it was called, and they were trying to reforge reunion. And of course, racism factors into this.
Let me ask you one thing that's not actually part of the book, but it was in one of the interviews that I read that you did, because I found this also fascinating. And this is a big question that that we talked about on Friday, actually, too, with Jamel Bowie. It was a letter written by Charles Blackford to talk about strategy for the 1889 state elections. I suspect I mean, you know what I'm talking.
Oh, yeah.
But let me quote it, because I don't know unless you've memorized it. But it really is stunning. Blackford is, and this goes. We should say this speaks to the question of how racism was utilized, developed. I mean, I'm sure we could find this dynamic 100 years prior to this, maybe even 150 years prior to this in this country. But it is an indicative of how racism is used by essentially capitalists. He goes on to say, the Negroes must understand we will give them perfect equality before the law and treat them with justice and fairness and liberality, but that they're not to rule us. In other words, we're not going to give you really any of those things. And that we will die before they shall do so. The election must be carried peaceable if we can, but by force if necessary. And then, this is actually you saying, then he showed Democratic elites calculating how to break the white-black coalition that had fueled the readjuster movement. This is the coalition between, I guess, sort of like what would ultimately be the Populist Party and maybe populists and white workers union.
So it was a black-white biracial coalition that actually succeeded in Virginia and scared much of the rest of the South.
And so he said, you cannot keep the lower class of white men in line unless they distinctly understand that they are to make their selection between the Negro on one side and the white race on the other. Once get that clearly before the people as an issue, and we are safe. Otherwise, the tariff and other matters, which are perfectly immaterial in comparison, will beat us. Just for people don't fully grasp what's going on there, will you just tease that out for us?
Oh, sure. I mean, again, they had seen black and white people vote together, and they did things that was called, why it's called readjusters is because the debt load was heavy, and a lot of the poor people couldn't pay their debts, and they would get into prison and other trouble. So a white-black coalition formed and put into office both as governor and then U.S. Senator William Mahone, who was a Republican, basically, and that scared the Democratic South, and they needed to break that up. And you can use violence, and that was one of the means, but you can also use racism, and that is what they were trying to do, try to make sure that white did not vote with black. The third thing you can use is Confederate tradition. Jubal Early gave a speech, not at that exact same time, but nearly, where he addressed veterans. And one of the things they were very aware of was that the Civil War was not always popular with everybody, that there were deserters. And Jubal Early said at a Memorial Day speech, it's okay if you deserted then, just don't desert us now. We want you to vote the right way. So trying to bring even former soldiers back into the fold using Confederate traditions in that way. But the big fear, and there was a little bit of that same kind of movement in South Carolina, and the big fear was that you just can't have white and black people voting in the same direction.
And how successful was Blackford?
They eventually, they eventually won, but it took a while. One of the things that it is kind of interesting is just how long black voting did stay. It persisted until we finally started to get the Jim Crow laws that started in the 1890 in Mississippi, and then unfolding throughout the next decade. So they used the law, they used massacres, they used the Wilmington Massacre in 1898, and all of that was to achieve white supremacy.
What does all of this, what does this dynamic that we've been talking about, what is it, what is the lesson for us today? I mean, on some level, like, you know, in terms of how early history starts to get written, I guess.
Well, it was getting written just during that time period. In fact, in 1866, a guy by the name of Pollard, who was a newspaper editor, published a book called The Lost Cause. And that's what has stuck the name on to that movement of denial about the Confederacy and what it fought for. So it happens pretty darn quickly, almost like you see, frankly, today, spin doctors putting new, how do you interpret and create a narrative of what just happened, like in January 6th, for example. On the one hand, I see it as an insurrection. Not everybody does, I guess. There are others who try to spin a different tale, that these are patriots trying to do their thing. So you see that happening in the Civil War just about by a year after, and it just picks up momentum as you go through the late 19th century. And then you add historians like the Dunning School, and then you add popular culture, and it becomes embedded in our DNA in ways that are really hard to tear apart right now.
And obscures dynamics that are going on 150 years later.
Absolutely. We're still unraveling that past.
William Blair, professor of Middle American History at Penn State, author of The Record of Murders and Outrages, Racial Violence and the Fight Over Truth at the Dawn of Reconstruction. We will put a link to that at majority.fm. Can't thank you enough for taking the time with us today.
It was a real pleasure, and I can't thank you enough.
All right, folks. There it is.
Racial violence at the dawn of reconciliation, huh? Talking about the Build Back Better bill?
Almost went there. Almost went there. Yeah, just a little bit, a little frazzled today, folks. Do
you think the reason Kyle Rittenhouse is so welcomed by a society that was in part won by racialized terrorism, that realized it might require racialized terrorism to maintain that? But
I mean, honestly, I don't think there's that level. Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe there's that level of intellectual understanding behind it, but I think it's also just sort of, I mean, when people say, like, why do you spend so much time on pushing back on conservative narratives and whatnot? And I don't want people to misinterpret that that we think that we have, a particular, a level of influence, but it's just as an exercise, but also, butterfly wings. This is, I don't know how the interpretation of what Kyle Rittenhouse did will impact our history in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or our future, I should say. But we certainly have examples from Reconstruction and so on, and like putting up those statues in the 1920s as to what it does to our present day. Mm-hmm. Like, we can't know. That's what you begin to understand when you talk to a historian like that, the implication of journalism, of narrative building, of all those things in the moment. And, who knows what any you know, given one of those events in the reporting, you know, if it would have had, what kind of influence it would have had. You know, you can't really sort of like disentangle all those things. But largely it is, the lesson is it's important to make sure that events that are happening are interpreted and are reported in a way that is that is not a lie, because that lie can actually have a lot more durability and impact than you probably anticipate in the moment.
Yeah, and I made that dark web message because you talk about all these people posing as the seekers of unvarnished truth, and if you historicize this at all, the idea that wokeness is the obstacle to truth and not like capitalists using racism, and the effect that's had on just our understanding of our place in the world, just for generations, is, I think, stunning and never even touched at by, like, of course, the IDW folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why, you know, things like January 6th, the commission on January 6th is so important. And this is why people push back on it so much. This is why people push back on it so much, because they don't want this narrative to be out there. They understand you know, there are reasons why the online community and off the online community, but there's reason why people fight this stuff out on Twitter, and whether they're conscious of it or not, you gotta suppress this stuff or magnify and enhance this stuff in the moment, because that's where the trajectory starts. I mean, that's, you know, can you imagine what would the difference have been if YouTube existed during Reconstruction?
I mean, yeah, like, we live in a country where, like, in the 1830s, 20s, there's legislation punishing people for teaching slaves to read, right? And we live in, like, this is new, these revisions of history, like he's talking about, that's like the 70s, right? But even then, you have new information technology that makes it easier to spread this stuff. So that's why you have the PC freakouts to this critical race theory freakout.
That's an important point that people should understand. You know, if it is only because of, like, people's work, you know, like Foner and others in the 70s and late 60s and the 70s, that we have access to this information now and this understanding of our history and our understanding of, like, why were all these Confederate statues all over the place, and why were they put up in 1920, so, you know, 50 years after the war. And the reason why you're seeing such pushback to critical race theory, and it's obviously not critical race theory that's being taught there, but there is sort of you may get more history, more explicit history, maybe history of Reconstruction in some of these schools, but also just an awareness of the dynamic that's going on in these countries. I would love it if they teach critical race theory in schools, or some derivation, and maybe they will. But the reason why there's a pushback on it is, again, for this same reason. You need to obscure the dynamics that are going on in our society. And that's that. Folks, I promised you, we have a couple contenders. Bradley, you're going to have to set up a spreadsheet, and we'll input this. I'm going to put this on your desk because people probably can figure it out, but I've told people, email us at majorityreporters@gmail.com and put in the subject line, distance to the live show. As you know, we're doing a live show to commemorate January 16th in Boston, Mass. at 3 p.m.
Big live.
The big live, as we call it. You can get your tickets at majoritylive.com or majorityreportlive.com. And we have people traveling from some pretty significant distances. Send us an email, subject line, distance to live show. Hi, everyone. My submissions to the farthest traveler. I'm going to the show from State College, Pennsylvania. That's Kyle. State College is in the middle of nowhere. It's not easy to get there. You get down like, what is it, Route 86? It's 86 or 80. 80 is the big turnpike there, I think. But Sandy of Left of the Box says she's going to be traveling from the live show from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. She's driving solo. It's a 9-hour drive. She's having to deal with her passport. Hey guys, as per show rules, I'm writing to you on direct order of Sam Seder. A few years ago, I was at the top of the now famous door Seder funnel you folks have constructed. Started listening to the show. Really tough time for me personally. Found you guys through a slew of recommended videos alongside the Jimmy Dore, TYT, and Joe Rogan. Since then, I've been a daily viewer of the show. Wow. College, marriage, job, family, buying first home, all since the time that I started listening. That's fantastic. Wow. Alex Jones listener, Glenn Beck fan before discovering Demi Jor and then getting to the Majority Report. And coming from the live show, wait, oh, he didn't say where from. Oh, darn it. Well, all right. He's not in the running. I'm from Winnipeg, staying in Toronto, and I will be attending the live show, says Andy. And then Kate, she brings the hammer down, traveling from L.A.
Wow.
And then Gabe from, I'm not sure where, I'm going to guess Canada. Google says 930 kilometers. That is not, nice try. It's
not going to sneak one past us.
Yeah, that is kilometers instead of miles. That's not going to cut it. Don't write in and tell me how many inches it is. Or centimeters, for that matter. You're going to come in with mileage. But send us your emails. Majority Live if you want to join us. And enter the competition. I don't know what you're going to get. Maybe we'll like some swag or something for the top 3 furthest travelers. That seems fair. All right. Going to take a break. Head into the fun half of the program. Don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. Oh, let me just say this, too. I don't know about what's happening with tomorrow. Emma may be here solo. I don't want to come in and this is like 1% doctrine territory because of folks traveling. So if for whatever reason, maybe I would call in or something for a little bit. But if for whatever reason, I am not here tomorrow, I want to wish everybody, and Wednesday we're going to have a pre-recorded interview. Check it out. Great one on the post office. But if for whatever reason I'm not here tomorrow because of this little COVID scare, everybody's healthy. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but better safe than other people being sorry, in my opinion. Have a great Thanksgiving and safe travels. And we will see you soon. We'll have all new material, though, the whole week except for Thursday. We're going to take Thursday off. Don't forget, you can support this show by becoming a member. Join themajorityreport.com. And don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And not only is Sunset Lake Seder doing a massive sale, 30 to 60% off, they are donating proceeds, 10% of the proceeds from everything they sell between now and December 1st. 10% will go towards donating to Give Directly. We will match at the Majority Report. We're going to match that 10%. So great deals to be had there, and doing some good. So check that out as well. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, if you wanted to watch Christopher Hitchens and Whoopi Goldberg debate Bill Maher Dennis Prager and Gene Simmons of KISS about communism. Well, patreon.com/leftreckoning. We did just that this weekend. David and I talk about a very amazing politically incorrect segment where Bill Maher tells Whoopi Goldberg that her family that died in Vietnam weren't wasted lives, because sometimes wasted lives are unwasted lives because you prove your enemies how tough you are. So pretty classic Bill Maher stuff. So patreon.com/leftreckoning for that. And also we got a talk with Lillian Chichurchia on Wednesday for folks.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Back.
we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. It is the fun half. And I'm going to be opening up the phone lines. Like I say, a little bit, I was behind it today. I got in late and like juggling Saul and what are you going to do? Taking the phone calls. 646-257-3920 is the number. And let's look at the, do we know how big the Build Back Better bill in the House was? Because now I'm seeing $2.2 trillion. We got to look into that a little bit. It's going to be interesting. Jayapal may have really pulled something off. If, the reporting I'm starting to see is that Manchin's coming around. Cinema, I think, it's got terrified, and she's coming around. We'll see. We'll see about it. I mean, 2.2, 1.75, these necessary but insufficient in many respects. But Still, these are big bills, and good to see. Here is, let's go right in on this. Here is the Daily Wire's Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, and Michael Knowles reacting to the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict.
I have to say, obviously, I'm elated that Kyle Rittenhouse is getting his life back and that he's not going to spend the rest of his life in prison. But a part of this feels bittersweet. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. Like we're even having to go through this process, that we're even at the end of our seats wondering, is this guy going to get his life back? Or are people going to be so fearful of mob justice and people coming after their families, they're just going to vote the way that the mainstream media and legacy media wants them to? It's sickening to me also because of his age. And I'm talking about when this actually took place. He was a 17-year-old kid. His life is never going to be the same, right? You don't come out of this and as the same person that you were going into this. This is a kid that was smeared as a domestic terrorist and a white supremacist, not just by media members, but by the now sitting president of the United States. You know, then he was campaigning for the president of the United States. This is problematic. So for me right now, I'm going to be completely honest. I want vengeance. Like I want to make sure that Kyle, until he's 92 years old, is suing every single person from LeBron James to Joe Biden to the people that are in Congress, Ayanna Pressley. This is not over for me. It doesn't feel like a win.
All right. And I'm going to have to put my hand up for pause because apparently you guys can't hear me. Let's be clear here. I mean, at first I'm like, oh, I thought she was going to say, like, this is bittersweet because the guy killed 2 people, shot down 2 people. Whether you think that he was legally culpable for killing those 2 people, wounding a 3rd, it's bittersweet because, you know, you don't want to see him going through this, but he did kill 2 people, and that's a horror. You don't want people to die. And you probably also don't want to chill protests by having someone, you know, police it with a gun. But no, in fact, that's just going the opposite way. She was afraid of the mob justice that could be associated with people who want to see some accountability for somebody who killed 2 people. Not the mob justice involved in being a vigilante, going out there with a weapon and deciding you're going to police the protest. The families of the, at least one of the families, I think, of one of the victims is suing the Kenosha police for allowing these vigilantes to come out there and, I guess, quasi-police the protests.
And how could you not want a massive investigation into that?
I mean, are people saying that there shouldn't have been a trial?
That's, I don't think a lot of people are saying that, but the way that the celebratory way that people have greeted the news implies to me like that's a subtext.
I mean, well, like, what are they going to sue? What is the suit about here that she's fantasizing about? Like Kyle Rittenhouse is going to sue. I mean, the guy killed 2 people with his weapon. He shot 3. The law apparently allows you to put yourself in a position where you need to defend yourself. That has, I think, some dangerous precedents. Maybe that law should be fixed. It won't be. As a society, I think we should discourage people from taking guns to decide that they're going to unilaterally police protests.
Yeah, not enough discouragement, I think, from people who are really interested in the media bias angle of this story.
No kidding. I mean, are we going to, like, the Supreme Court's looking at a case right now in New York State about conceal and carry and who can carry handguns. Are we going to be seeing people like just bring their guns on to the subway and just be like, yeah, no, I'm just making sure people pay their tolls, making sure that people aren't using somebody else's Metro card? I mean, where does, like, what, we take guns now and make sure that people come to a full stop at a stop sign? We'll shoot out the tires of your car. Citizens citation. I mean, one would think that there would be discouragement for this type of behavior. And I don't understand how people think that there shouldn't have been a trial. You just like sign off on, it was at a protest, killed them. Killed them. Seems pretty obvious to me that you need at least a trial, right? Too bad Candace Owens feel like satisfied with that though. Here is Fox's Rachel Campos Duffy and another crew of people who are talking about like, we should all go out as soon as we see protesters and get armed and start firing.
There's another thing about this as well, which is when communists, when anarchists, and when, racial agitators come to your town, they burn, they loot your businesses, they ruin your dreams. Are you supposed to, because there's a racial angle, supposedly, in this case, because of Jacob Blake, are you supposed to hide in your house? I personally think that my husband, we would defend our town. And I think a lot of people in Kenosha did. Kyle Rittenhouse was not the only person carrying a weapon. There were people with bats and rifles and guns. Some people sleeping with them, other people outside of their businesses because there weren't enough police officers to keep that town safe. And that's what happens when government fails.
The idea of somebody standing out in front of their business with a bat or trying to protect their business is one thing. But Kyle Rittenhouse is a bit of a rover, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Just literally looking for trouble.
Also, the government failure is never like when the cop kills somebody.
Right. I love it when the anarchists and the, what else? The communists.
Racial agitators.
Yeah. Stop agitating race.
That's Fox News.
Oh my God. I mean, this is what I think was problematic about and I don't know enough about, the statutes or whatnot, but one would imagine that there should be, if there isn't, some type of criminal statute about what constitutes a reasonable understanding of putting yourself into a situation where you may end up killing somebody. I mean, it seems to me the very act of bringing a weapon, this isn't a situation where you're in your house and your house is threatened and you're stepping out on the lawn with a weapon. This is a conscious effort to go down to a place where he doesn't own anything, where he has no more business being there than the protesters, but he brings down a weapon. That to me seems like pretty open and shut that he's looking for trouble. Like, why are you going there? Why are you bringing a weapon? No reason. Are you looking for trouble? No. I don't expect trouble. I always go out dressed like Rambo with my weapon on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. I do it every night. I just walk around downtown.
I might be a medic, or I might kill for property in some sort of nebulous way.
Yeah. I mean, there probably should be a law, if there's not a law, that says that when you take a weapon into a situation where you are making the conscious choice to be there, and you've already made it clear that your assessment of the situation is that it's dangerous enough that I should bring a weapon, and you end up killing somebody there, it seems to me that you have some liability. I mean, I would imagine there's got to be some type, or there should be some criminal liability. Certainly going to be civil liability. You walk down there and with a weapon, what do you think is going to happen? Why did you bring the weapon if you thought nothing would happen? Well, like what exactly? What's the theory here? But that's where we're at.
It's funny just to contrast this. I didn't bring it up because it's a little bit after the the time frame of the book we were talking about, but the Posse Comitatus Act in 1870, late 1870s, basically saying the military can't do that sort of occupation stuff that the author was saying was necessary, because it's against the law.
Right.
But we'll deputize a 17-year-old teenager.
But if you're untrained and you're good to go, come on down. It seems a little bit of a mess, a little bit messed up to me. I don't know. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. Getting right in. Pole position, aren't you?
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, John.
All right, 15 states have finished their maps for the Federal House of Representatives, while 6 states only have 1 House vote and the maps aren't needed. Before we talk about our disagreements about the current gerrymandering cycle, I'd like to state that I support the Freedom to Vote Act, which will eliminate partisan federal gerrymandering, as well as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Though nonpartisan commissions are not a panacea, they can have negative results towards one party. Right now, the maps look bad for Democrats in Arizona, even though they're being drawn by a nonpartisan commission. Recently, you've been saying that due to gerrymanderings, Republicans have already won 5 more seats in the House, which is all they need to retake that chamber. While this may be correct, I think the odds are that it's not right. Especially if you consider the New York gerrymander, which could be 23 to 3 for Democrats or 22 to 4. Currently, the split is 19 to 8 favoring Democrats, and New York will be losing 1 seat. In Illinois, if Governor Pritzker signs the maps already signed by the legislature, Democrats are expected to pick up 1 seat, and Republicans are expected to lose 2 seats, and the state loses 1 seat. In Oregon, Democrats are favored to pick up the new seat created there. In West Virginia, they lost 1 seat, and all the seats were Republicans, so they go from 3 Republican seats to 2. I have a lot of respect for Ari Berman and David Daley, 2 of the most renowned gerrymandering experts. I've watched all of the many interviews that you've conducted with them, and I've read their books, and they have a tendency to focus just on gerrymandering as opposed to an election analyst who will cover every aspect of the election. Many times, wave elections have been overturned, have overturned gerrymanders. After the 2020 gerrymander, I constantly heard the Republican gerrymanders of the House were so precise and thorough it would be impossible for the Democrats to win the House with those maps. Yet the Democrats did win in 2018 and 2020. When Republicans flipped 63 seats in 2010, it was done using the same maps. The Democrats won 31 seats in 2006 and 21 seats in 2008. I don't agree with many things that 538 and the Cook Political Report write about, but they do have a thorough report of the redistricting process. And 538 has Democrats gaining 4 seats right now, Republicans gaining 4 seats, and they have 11 seats that they say are highly competitive out of the seats that have been, have finalized maps right now, which is those seats there are 4 seats less, 4 less highly competitive seats than there were from the 2020 elections. So one of the biggest stories of the 2022 gerrymandering cycle is that Republicans and to some degree Democrats are increasing the number of safe seats. For example, in Texas, there's only 1 highly competitive district, and in the 2020 election, there were 4 seats that had races within 4 points. So, like the 15th district there is an even district, and the next closest district is for the Democrats to win is a Republican plus 13 district, which is the 23rd district. So despite constantly hearing how Republicans will gerrymander Democrats out of the House for decades, the process of drawing maps has actually improved over the 2012 maps. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan had Republican governors, and now all three have Democratic governors, and their maps will be drawn by commissions and the courts. So
you want me to respond to that?
Well, no, I just want to say also, there's 7 other states that also had Republican full control for the last time the districts were drawn, and now there's not.
All right, and so what are you saying? You're saying that that you think that some of the concerns about gerrymandering and where Democrats are going to be in that instance are overblown?
Absolutely, completely overblown. And I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on, the New York maps, but they are very much overblown. I mean, a lot of it is going to depend on how much of a waived election it is. I mean, a lot of people, say it may be a big Republican wave. I mean, there's still got plenty of time, I mean, almost a year away. But, I think I stated pretty clearly my positions is, I mean, right now, if you look out of the maps, I mean, they're pretty much even. And I think that, I mean, you have Florida, and those maps were, a lot of people thought that they were going to be, very much favoring Republicans. And the first 4 maps that they put out for consideration were considered pretty much even, and maybe even some people even say they might have a Democratic advantage. California, with the 52 seats that they have a commission, and they're who knows how their maps are going to turn out. I mean, they look pretty good to me, but I mean, who knows? I mean, they still got they're still at the very beginning of their process. But, I mean, overall, I don't think – I mean, there may be, I think they have – like I said, what am I –
All right. Well, I mean, I guess I get your point's taken.
I mean, listen. That basically Republicans are going to benefit like 2.5 seats or 2 or 3 seats, and I don't even agree with the way that they've looked at Texas. I don't think that the Republicans are going to pick up any seats at all in Texas. If they do, it's going to be in the Rio Grande Valley. And so the big takeaway is that these states are making these seats much more. I mean, they're not making them competitive. That's the big story, as opposed to actually having, Republicans actually win these seats, drawn to win. They're drawn to have less competitive seats.
All right. Well, I mean, the way you lay it out, John, maybe you've convinced me. I gotta dig into it a little bit more.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I wasn't expecting that response.
Well,
but,
I mean, I think that, look, there are some, like, when New York and Illinois are really locked in, then, we can make a better assessment, right? I mean, because this is still sort of a moving target, as it were. Right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's true. But I mean, I guess that another point is, and I think you would agree to this, is if and this is like kind of what Ari Berman and David Daley, because they're pretty pure in their instincts. Like, they're saying that Democrats shouldn't do the same things that Republicans do, which is try to make a strong gerrymander, getting as many seats as they can. And could you imagine if California did a gerrymander? I mean, like Colorado, they just set their maps up, and it looks like the Republicans are probably going to win their seat. It's like a R+3 district. And so, I mean, all of these states, Washington State that has a commission, Oregon, I think it actually turned to the Democrats' advantage. But I mean, if they lose the House and everybody blames it on gerrymandering, I think we should blame it on state legislatures for not actually, saying, the Supreme Court is gonna allow gerrymandering, and we shouldn't, go into a fight, not ready to actually fight.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, and so I think we should really think about those things. But I don't see it as bad, and it's just as everybody's saying, and so I mean, who knows?
All right, John, I appreciate it.
Okay,
we'll see.
Okay,
all right, bye.
Okay, thank you very much.
John from San Antonio, folks. That's why he's here. We'll see. Calling from a 402 area code. Who's this? Where are we calling?
This is Pat from Nebraska.
Pat from Nebraska. What's on your mind?
Just wanted to kind of touch on something that I thought was pretty interesting, especially with the Rittenhouse trial and everything. I've spent a decent amount of time in right-wing, not so much right-wing, but gun YouTube, which is dominated by the right-wing, obviously. And something that's kind of interesting about this is that they praise people like the McCloskeys, and they praise people like Rittenhouse, which anybody who is a gun owner talks about being safe, being smart with it, being legal, following the, 4 basic rules of firearm safety, that type of thing. And something that they don't ever talk about with these people, like the McCloskeys and Rittenhouse, is that they, like you had said, insert themselves into situations that the McCloskeys, she flagged her husband multiple times with a loaded firearm with her finger on the trigger, just breaking, 2 out of 4 of the 4 basic rules of firearms.
Right, of course.
These people are considered, they're put on pedestals and seen as, oh, look at them, defending their territory. And it's like, if you were in fear for your life, like Rittenhouse or like the McCloskeys, you would be, especially in the McCloskeys case, having a literal castle behind them that they were afraid of, all these protesters breaking in. You wouldn't go outside. If you were in their words, a tactical situation or whatever.
McCloskey operator.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's an entirely foolish endeavor that these people, they're putting the worst gun owners on a pedestal as people in favor of gun rights. And, in my opinion as well, it's very confusing because,
well, it's not confusing. It's only confusing because you're trying to sort of place that type of logic. Let's be clear. This is not, Rittenhouse was not going out there to protect anything.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest. Let's be clear here. He didn't know what was under threat when he got into his car with the gun. He wanted to show up and, face off with these people, with these protesters. There was he couldn't have articulated a certain thing. There could be trouble down there. I better get down there. Why are you going? Because I got a gun.
Yeah, and the whole logic being as well, and I've seen this as, something that they talk about as well a lot in the kind of gun part of YouTube, is that if you need to go somewhere and you think you need to bring a gun to go there, you just shouldn't go.
Yeah, but that's not what this is about.
Well, this is,
that's the thing, is that his actions actually going there were explicitly political in that respect.
And this is the effect on gun culture that capitalism has, because it turned out that those guys that liked hunting with a double-barreled shotgun like ducks on the weekend, that's not a big enough market. So you need to appeal to people who are going to buy the military looking stuff and pretend that they're going to, when they play their zombie video games, they think about doing that to people in real life.
Without a doubt. I appreciate the call. A friend used to live up next to me upstate, had a whole series of weapons, and he brought out an AR-15 with a scope and a not just with a scope, with the laser pointer. And I'm like, what's that for? Zombies. I mean, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, this is, all you need to do is look at the way that people are dressing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you wearing these like outfits when you go out there with your gun?
Punisher logos.
Like or just like, I'm going to buff up when I go there. Like, what? If you're going out there to defend something, like, why are you taking the time to, I gotta dress like I'm in the military. I gotta dress like I'm Rambo. I mean, this is like, it's absurd. Calling from a 626 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's me, Aaron.
Okay, Aaron, where are you calling from?
California. We spoke before last year. I'm the Libertarian.
You're the Libertarian?
Okay. I was the guy we spoke last year. You had a YouTube video that said a Libertarian caller tried to outwit Sam Seder.
I mean, I feel like we probably have like 10 of
me.
those. But I'm sorry, Aaron. I don't remember you, but I'm happy to hear from you. I just, you have to understand, I do 200 or 300 shows a year, and we get, a lot of Libertarian callers, but I appreciate your calling in.
No worries. Well, our last conversation was about the minimum wage.
Okay.
And I kind of wanted to rectify. So the last thing I said, in LA, it was it's more than $15 an hour to have an apartment and the amenities to live. A basic standard of living that you presented. And I said that it's still not enough, but at the same time, I'm still not for the minimum wage. I think that's kind of like where we started off.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I was saying that I think the minimum wage should allow you to be able to afford to live where you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. And definitely not. $15 an hour in LA, I mean, if you're trying to get like a basic apartment on your own, and unfortunately, it's not enough, and I understand that because I'm libertarian. And it's not to say I don't want people to have more money and to, not live properly. It's just that I just don't believe in the state is capable of doing that.
Okay. I'm sorry. Say again.
I don't believe them. I don't believe that the minimum wage will cater to that. I don't believe that the minimum wage will be able to do that for people. Even if you raise it to like $20 an hour or $100 an hour, I just don't think first of all, that's possible. But even if you could, I think what would happen would be inflation, and that's pretty much it. Because when you really think about it, it's not really necessarily the price. It's not necessarily the price that is the problem. It is the productivity, the limited resources that people have in regards to what we have in LA. But there's a lot of people living in LA, but there's just not a lot of homes. So if you really want to focus on the standard of living, you need to focus on production as opposed to the living wage. And that's my belief.
All right. So you're saying that if you want to allow people to live in LA, we need to have more homes, and
yes.
And maybe we need to decommodify to a certain extent too, right?
What do you mean by decommodify?
Well, we got a lot of people out there using homes to make a profit.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And the numbers I've seen are something like around 30 to 40,000 people who are unhoused. Probably more. I think we're just talking LA, right? And that there's something like close to 100,000 vacant units. That doesn't seem like efficient use of resources, does it?
No, for sure. But why are they vacant, and how are they able to sustain vacant homes or vacant places? That's my question.
How are the owners able to sustain vacant homes? Well, maybe they're renting them out with Airbnb. maybe they just are rich enough to afford housing.
Right. So you think, that would suck. That would suck if they're just like investing into
Yeah, maybe they're looking to just maybe they're just looking to flip it.
So what kind of like legislation would you stipulate?
There's a lot of
to
places
solve that issue?
I know. There's a lot of places upstate that I know. For instance, in New York, just off the top of my head, where they're basically saying like can't do short-term rentals anymore.
Okay, short-term rentals. And what?
You can't do Airbnb,
meaning, like,
which you're using it as a hotel. You got to actually put it on the market, put it on the rental market. That would, you put 93,000 units on the rental market, and rents are going to come down.
Got it. Okay, that could be a solution, but at the same time, I don't think. I think that that's a solution for people that are invested in living there for a very long time. But I don't think it really solves the issue with, and I'm not saying it because I want to contradict you because, I'm a libertarian. Like I said, that's good for people that need homes, like maybe not permanently, but for long term. But I think to really solve the issue is finding a ways to make more homes. And I think one of the issues with the production of homes is, you're probably gonna disagree with me, but maybe.
Well, I just told you we have all the homes we need. Right?
Okay.
I mean,
right.
I mean, before we get into how building codes are making it hard to build new homes. I mean, I think like if you're worried about the supply of homes, they're clearly there.
Okay.
Aaron, always a pleasure. Yeah. Always a pleasure to touch base.
All right. Thank you.
Call me again. He must wait to call when he's in his car, and then he just sort of. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, one quick fact for anybody that enters these debates in the future is just to know that housing vacancies usually outstrip houselessness by a factor of 3. Most places we have lots of vacant homes.
I mean, I think I am okay also with getting building codes so that we can go higher in certain areas and have more density. I think that can.
Oh yeah, I would get rid of my personal, my war on cars. I would get rid of parking requirements. That if you need a certain amount of parking spaces for a certain amount of units, that basically is a subsidy to cars.
Yep. I mean, there's a whole host of different things that we can do. In the meantime, we can also raise the minimum wage, which will help people. But if you're worried about it being inflationary, if you basically think that we can never attain an equilibrium where people can afford to live in a place, right? Like, I mean, if inflation is not just a function. We can inflate wages, or people can make enough money so that they can afford to live there. And if your theory is that if that happens, people are just going to raise their prices and price a certain amount of people out, which I think probably is sort of like foundational to our system, then it seems like if you actually are concerned about allowing people to be able to live in a place and afford to live, then it seems to me that you have to then support some function of the state to make it affordable for people to stop that sort of like cycle. Maybe it's rent control. Maybe it's limiting the ways in which you can profit off of an apartment or a house. There's a whole host of different ways in which there can be intervention to stop that cycle, if you believe that's the cycle that inevitably is going to happen. So, Nerd Cheetah. It was refreshing to hear you self-reflect on your own political leanings Friday. Not really willing to align. That's smart. Not socialist. Some system that includes a little tension, competition, reward is good for progress. More of an advocate of incrementalism, I think you said. Is incrementalism the current democratic establishment model? I don't know. I don't speak for the democratic establishment.
It doesn't really seem like their practice. I mean, unless these increments are extremely small when it comes to things like climate.
What direction does the party work to move the nation incrementally in? Is one step forward after pushed three backwards incrementalism? I don't think one step forward after pushed three backwards is incrementalism. That's going the wrong direction. One being forward, three being backward. That would put you at a net -2. I'm not exactly sure I understand what the point is. I mean,
it's another person that wants permission not to vote. So just don't vote.
Just like it, but what is so? It's also just sort of honestly like a fantasy version of the way any human endeavor happens, right? Like, I mean, there are people who want stuff. And then there are people who have managed to get themselves in a position to either deliver or not deliver that stuff. But they're in a position to deliver for some people. And then there are times those two things are in tension. They want to deliver some of this stuff and they don't want to deliver some of this stuff. If that makes sense. So for instance, like Nancy Pelosi, her big thing is the children always. So there are proposals that she favors that she thinks that she can sort of like characterize and represent to her constituency as fulfilling what they want. Her constituency is, in San Francisco. And there are other representatives who are in the House who want something that's more ambitious or are not as conflicted in terms of the people that they are trying to deliver for. And the question is, how do you empower the people that are representing those interests more than the people who are representing other interests? Like all this stuff of like, the idea that there is a cabal of people who are sort of like able to map this out in such a specific way is just, I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's honestly like, it's like a religion.
Well, it's detached from history. Like you read Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, and there's a part where he's talking about how the struggle, which cannot vote, is regarding elections between sort of like the liberal white supremacists that descend from like the Cecil Rhodes, who and the fascist white supremacists, the type of people who split with Britain to side with the Nazis during World War II, for instance, right? And it's just like to simply like from a movement perspective, they'd prefer the liberal descents of Cecil Rhodes. That's not saying like that's great or that's a step forward. Even it's just like in that case not as much of a step back. And that's like the idea that they're working together is just never true in history, right? There's always splits in the power structures.
Of course. And the bottom line is like wishing for an option that is not available. It's not a strategy. It's just not an actionable strategy. And I was talking about this the other night. Like I was supportive of Nader in 2000. I don't know I would have voted for him in a contested state. But the idea was get the guy enough votes at different places that's not contested around the country. I was in New York. It's not contested. and allow the Green Party to build something. And it was a joke. It was a joke. It's a joke played on us. You didn't do any of that. The party didn't do anything of that. And you know, the problem with like a lot of these like third party endeavors, and again, like I think the best way to build a third party, if that's what you're inclined to do, is to do it on a local level and to build it up.
Mm-hmm.
But like the amazing thing is that every person who voted for a third party, as far as I can tell, in any election, has done it to send a message or as a way of, to a party that is not meeting their demands. And yet, when that party that doesn't meet their demands loses, they're all like, now you're blaming me? Well, that's right. Yeah. Like, I don't understand. Like, that was the amazing thing about the whole sort of like Jill Stein thing. It was like, wasn't your strategy to send a message to the Democratic Party that like, we're going to vote third party and you're going to lose unless you meet us where we are. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
and then the Democrats lose and they're like, don't blame us. That's ridiculous. Well,
that's the thing is like they pivot so easily from don't blame the voters to their entire message is one of vote blaming, right? The real obstacle is that people keep voting Democrat. That's their only message all these years, which is that, come on, guys, you got to free your mind and just vote for Jill Stein this time or whoever we're going to put at the top of the ticket.
And I'm not, look, I'm not saying that Jill Stein was responsible for Hillary Clinton's loss. There's about, I think, 15 other things in that list that probably come before Jill Stein. But I just don't understand the theory here. The theory is we're going to threaten to do something, and then when it comes about, we're going to say, we didn't do it. Like, it seems to me, if I'm a third party, the first press release I put out on day one after an election like that is, we did it. Right? I mean, isn't that the whole point of the exercise? This is the thing I never understood. As soon as they succeed or don't succeed, but are in a position to take credit for what they should perceive as a success, they say that it wasn't, we didn't do anything. I don't get that. I really don't.
Yeah, don't look at us.
Yeah, it's weird. Wait, wasn't that the whole point? I don't know. I just found that pretty amazing. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. George Zimmerman walks so Kyle Rittenhouse could walk and get a Tucker Carlson special. Random info. Young Master Rittenhouse public speaking practice will give him an entry-level echo chamber paycheck and a way Ben Shapiro needs a sidekick for his rebooted podcast, Dumb and Dumber. Between the 101 and the 5. Sam, you should check the third episode of the Hinge Points podcast with Matt Christman and Daniel Bessner, where they discuss a major turning point in the Reconstruction era that could have taken this country world in a different direction. The idea of owning land is almost as absurd as owning people when you think about it.
Not quite, but it is absurd.
Pretty absurd. Not quite. Obamagate hotel plumber. Libertarian Aaron wasn't a great debater, but you should have Daryl Owens on if you're interested in discussing this. The vacant homes meme is misleading. Housing construction is extremely constrained in expensive cities and important than suburbs. Long Island, for example, has produced far more jobs than houses at a greater ratio than even New York City. I mean, I'm not making broad proclamations about this. I have no doubt that in some areas you got to increase density and got to allow for new construction.
Yeah, I'll just say I live in New York, seeing like giant high rises with basically empty, like lights that are never on at night, that are clearly just being sat on by wealthy developers. It's easy to believe that a fair part of this problem is people sitting on property.
Militant apathy. Please drill down on the kids on the plantation topic. This needs to be explored because people don't understand how rampant that was. Most black Southerners are products of this. I didn't get into it too much with the professor, but there was this dynamic where plantation owners would rape a lot of their slaves and essentially demanded that the children of this rape remain with them. And there was a lot of violence associated around that. Maybe we can go deeper into that. But this was one of the things that showed up in that registry. Recursive snowflakery. I wonder if these massacres he writes about could be seen as a precursor to the Jakarta method. Interesting. Sam Tight Pants, regarding the Arbery case. Sam, I appreciate and understand your practice as to not watch these various criminal trials. That said, I've been following and wanted to provide more context on your comments opening the show. While his killing is horrible, and I believe the jury will find the defendants rightfully guilty, there has been no evidence tendered by any party that Ahmed was merely jogging through the neighborhood. In fact, he has been seen on camera walking through an unfinished property owned by someone in the neighborhood. Travis McMichael, who shot him, had also seen him at night walking in that property 12 days prior. I
don't know. Like I remember that detail coming out, and like my response was, I grew up in like a newer development, and I did that all the time. I mean, as like a teenager and kids, like you just walk into them. Who cares? I don't know.
I don't know what the theory is in bringing that up. I really don't. But at the moment when these people shot him, he was jogging through the neighborhood. I don't know what the idea of like merely jogging through the neighborhood was. I mean, it's also possible that I jogged through this neighborhood. Oh, I see some type of like weird construction site. I'm going to go up there and check and see if I can find a loose piece of plywood. I mean,
North Dakota might be different, but walked it straight into those. There weren't even like, they're just wide open. You climb into the basement. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly have done that in New York City. There are places, well, maybe not completely, but like I've certainly done stuff like similar to that without the jogging part, more like walking.
Like an unfinished house. I mean, it's
Lori's guy. Hey, Sam, what would be your recommendation for the best one-volume treatment on Reconstruction? Phoners. And then I would also listen to, is it Blight? Mark Blight? Not Blight. Wait, what's the professor's name on from Yale that we had on?
Was it David Blight?
David Blight?
I don't know.
Yeah, David Blight.
Yeah.
His audio book, but Phoner is like the king. I love the show. Why isn't our actual history taught? No reckoning without contemplation. Well, I mean, he sort of explained why our history wasn't taught. That was not a mistake. 2009, I was in Arles, France at a photography exhibition. There was a whole show of Reconstruction photos of lynchings. So many were from my home state of Texas. Yes, there's a whole part of his book associated with that. All right, let's have some fun here, shall we? Mm-hmm. This is, so a Sirius XM radio host is super excited for this song. So listen, if you've been waiting for Kid Rock, when was the last time Kid Rock put out a video?
Might be last year, might be 5 years. I don't know.
I don't know either. But dude, well, let's check out the tweet, shall we? Get ready for this. Kid Rock is back. Let's see it.
I assume these other guys are like rock and roll guys, but I can't identify them. Oh, I'm not getting sound, Bradley.
So glad the bull god is back.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know either. Chew on this.
I'm gonna play the video now.
Yeah.
Sideways, my way, or the highway. Listen up, ain't nothing changed here. I still don't give a fuck. So what the fuck's up with all the backlash? You snowflakes, here's a news flash. Ain't nobody gonna tell me how to live. Years ago, we all thought it was a joke. See, that every kid got a motherfucking trophy. But yo, homie, here's a situation. A nation of pussies is our next generation. And these minions and their agendas. Every opinion has a millennial effect.
Stop. My God. What's the name of that song? Get Off My Lawn? My God. Oh my God. That's awesome.
We didn't get to the part where he flies to space. Won't say a safe space, but other people have made that joke. Flies to space in a rocket ship shaped like the middle finger. Don't Tell Me How to Live is that song, yeah.
I mean, it really is like sort of impressive. Just like there's so many people out there who are just like, oh my gosh, I'm somewhat inclined to be a little bit crotchety, and I'll put the rhyme up, and then I'm gonna make a ton of money because I'm gonna become some type of hero. It's all like the Dennis Miller model.
Yeah, we got a really great picture in Sound Pulse if you can find that, Bradley. Just the origins of a lot of people have commented on the giant house that Kid Rock grew up in with a tennis court and a pool because his dad owned a local car dealership. But this is early in his career, a wholly different kind of aesthetic. If you got that, Bradley.
There he is,
Kid Rock.
Put that music to that picture, and it doesn't sort of feel quite the same.
Ain't nobody gonna tell me how to do my hair.
God. And then I like honestly, that looks like a fake video.
Yeah, it does.
You told me we just got duped, dude. That's not real. The whole song was fake, and it's not real. I believe you. That said, since we're going around the horn here, here is an ad that Sebastian Gorka did for Newsmax. I gotta say, the era of the pajama boys, is that what it was?
Yep.
Back for this guy.
If time be of all things the most precious, wasting time must be the greatest indulgence. I say never leave until tomorrow that which you can do today. Today should be the day you reclaim your life and live pain-free like I do.
Oh gosh, I wanted to get there before that came up. Like what? Try and guess where this is going. Time. The Lincoln Memorial, the American flag.
Yeah. We haven't talked enough about how the Biden winning is the pajama boy restoration.
Indeed. And Gorka, of all people, man, this just seems a little bit snowflakey, a little bit soft.
Charlie
it?
Kirk did that too. Remember with that thing he was trying to throw a football and kind of saying, ouch?
Ow, I've hurt my arm. Gorka, it just seems like he's walking around. He's in pain. Let's go back to the beginning. We'll watch this again.
Holding up that giant noggin.
If time be of all things the most precious, wasting time must be the greatest indulgence. I say never leave until tomorrow that which you can do today. Today should be the day you reclaim your life and live pain-free like I do. Many great Americans have walked this very path I've walked today, and I'm so grateful that I have the ability to physically be here and share my story with you. Recently, an injury limited my ability to move, and I was experiencing a great deal of pain. Like many of you suffering from pain, I wanted a 100% drug-free solution to pain, and I found it, Relief Factor. Relief Factor is 100% drug-free and created by doctors, backed by scientific research, specifically formulated to help your body fight pain and inflammation. You truly can feel the difference. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or just go to relieffactor.com to feel the difference.
What's in that? What's in that? It's 100% drug free. Like, what's in it? Like, he doesn't have to say anything about what's in it.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out now.
Gorka, I'm going to buy it. If it's Gorka, why wouldn't I buy it?
He looks so comfortable walking down the...
Let's say, it doesn't look like he's terribly mobile.
I wonder what the injury was.
I do too. It all seems so mysterious. It is a secret injury that did stuff to me that I can't tell you. And here's a bag, and it's blue, and it says pain relief. So why wouldn't you take it? I wonder what it could be. I want to buy it just to get the ingredients.
There's some omega-3 fatty acids, it looks like. Some turmeric.
All right.
Some resveratrol. That sounds like something, which is an antioxidant-like compound found mostly in the skin and seeds of grapes and berries.
Yep. Grapes, I know that stuff. Yeah. What else?
Icarin.
Icarin?
It's a traditional Chinese herb.
Okay.
And that's what we got from wellnessverge.com.
There you go.
Wellness Verge. You're wellness verged.
We're just going to sell this. We don't have to say what's in it. We're just going to sell it because it's Gorka. Everybody trusts Gorka for their medications.
What does it mean to be drug free then? Because those things sound like drugs.
They're not. They're natural drugs. That's the
not
other thing.
FDA like approved or something.
I don't know. Like, look, I mean, they're a spice. I don't know. Maybe they're not technically drugs. I don't know because they're not like synthetic manufacture. I don't know.
Huh.
I'm almost sold on it though. If I see Gorka jog around that thing, then I'm down. I'm buying it. Grift Christie. Rittenhouse said in a recent interview that he supports BLM and peaceful protesting and says, and as he says it, you can see him suppressing a smile. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, have you seen the Times' beautiful breakdown of liberal hypocrisy in blue states where voters want Democrats to win, but they either vote against implementation of policies like affordable housing? It's pretty scathing and true. Yeah, I've seen some of that. I got to dig deeper into it. But did you see, KC answered, did you see the awesome Steph Hofstetter tweets dunking on Ben Shapiro for lying about his height? As a shorter person, that's absolutely hilarious. No. Have you seen that? Matt, how did you miss that?
I did not see that. It sounds kind of too good to be true. There's this very funny Photoshop people did where Ben Shapiro is standing with Jordan Peterson, and they Photoshopped Shapiro to look like 6 inches shorter than he actually is. And the Daily Wire has used that Photoshop version of it on stories like several times.
It's so easy. Oh, here's let's do this. Tucker Carlson promoting J.D. Vance. We should say apparently 2 Fox contributors quit Fox because of Tucker Carlson's January 6th documentary.
Do we know the names?
Yeah, it was Hayes and Goldberg. And I could care less about both those guys. They're both inveterate liars as far as I'm concerned. Over the years, they're horrible. Mm. They probably were, their contract was probably up anyways. But the idea that those 2 guys are not responsible for everything you see at Fox and is absurd. It's like the Lincoln Project, as far as I'm concerned. But with that said, Tucker Carlson had Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance on. J.D. Vance, of course, also just a complete, I don't know, just like a product of venture capital and Peter Thiel.
Corporate plant.
And who has, went from like having to delete his tweets about Donald Trump to becoming trying to out-MAGA his opponent. But here it is.
Yeah, it's crazy, Tucker. And also, it's not just GoFundMe. A lot of the Silicon Valley tech companies actually matched employer donations to the rioters who were burning Kenosha down, but wouldn't allow Kyle Rittenhouse to actually crowdfund his legal defense, basically denying him the constitutional right to defend himself. You know, Trump famously said that the fake news was the enemy of the people. And I think about these Silicon Valley technology companies as the enemies of Western civilization. They are willing to burn down our entire constitutional republic so long as their share price goes up a nickel. And if we take anything away from this moment, it should be that we have a choice in this country between our constitutional liberties, between the rights that our forefathers fought for, or the bottom line of the Silicon Valley tech monopolists. It's time to break them up. It's time to destroy them. It's time to tax them. It's time to do whatever is necessary so that we can continue to have a good life in this country that all of us love.
I mean, I'm okay with taxing and breaking them up. He should talk to Peter Thiel. He doesn't have him on speed dial. I mean, isn't his campaign actually financed by Peter Thiel?
Indeed, yeah, we have a tweet to that effect here. Want to have dinner with me and Peter Thiel? Donate $10,800 by tomorrow, and I'll send you the details. This will be a small group with good food and better company. I mean, link to donate, yeah.
Do you think they're sitting there talking about the different ways they can break up things like Facebook or...
Which Peter Thiel is a board member of?
Yeah, I mean, give me a break. It's unbelievable. The just utter capacity to lie. But at least I'm sure, will you play the clip where Tucker Carlson says, hey, wait a second. I'm with you on that, but aren't you supported by Peter Thiel? Aren't you doing fundraising, like literally auctioning off dinner with him for fundraising? Can we play that clip? Because Tucker is a man of the people.
He's a socialist. Got it, Bradley?
Is that an actual clip?
No.
It's like, wait, what?
It's not an actual clip. No, never. Come on. Are you kidding? Tucker Carlson knows that he can get away with this. And he's just taking it all the way to the bank. All the way to the bank. Let's watch the ineffectual Chuck Todd really hold... Now, Kevin Kramer, was he the guy who body slammed a reporter? No. Do I have that?
That was Greg Gianforte, the Montana guy.
Okay. Here's Kevin Kramer, Republican from North Dakota, senator, asked if Paul Gosar's censure, about Paul Gosar's censure. Here is Chuck Todd.
It looks as if it's being condoned. Bad luck for the party?
I don't know. I think, Chuck, the problem is I don't think that was right. I don't. What Paul did probably wasn't right. I've never seen the meme myself. As you know, I did an op-ed criticizing Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've never met the woman, but her rhetoric early on, I just want to make sure that the party was distanced from that. But that said, at the same time, Ilhan Omar spews this gross anti-Semitic language, and she barely gets a slap on the wrist of that.
Keep playing. So when Chuck Todd says, what are you talking about? What gross anti-Semitic, stuff? So much so that John Yarmouth, her colleague, Jewish, came out and said the only reason why she gets dinged for these comments is because she's a woman and a woman of color. Do we have that clip from Chuck Todd?
No.
I'm living in a complete, sort of like parallel universe.
Like, I like the thing where he mentions the op-ed he wrote about Marjorie Taylor Greene. He's like, I did my thing about these freaks. Like, stop bothering me then.
Exactly.
There's my fig leaf.
Hey, what about the question where Chuck Todd says, all these op-eds that you're having to write about your colleagues, your fellow Republicans, does that seem weird to you? Does it seem weird that you have to write those op-eds?
Also, define anti-Semitism.
Exactly. How about what did she say? It's unbelievable they'll let that stand. All right, lastly, let's just do this last clip. And then we'll take one more phone call and do some IMs. Oh, yeah, I do want to. No, we'll do two then. I do want to see that other one. I forgot about that one. Now, you probably heard a lot about the concern about the red baiting because, as you know, Russiagate was almost pushed us, I was told, to the brink of nuclear war, as measured by the atomic scientists. And so when you see something like this, I'm sure there's going to be a million Substacks written about this exchange. Sarah John Kennedy with the OCC nominee Saul Omavara. She was born in the Soviet Union. And the guy is basically like, this is like the functional equivalent of somebody coming to me and saying, do you renounce your inclusion at Flag Street School, elementary school? Did you ever write a letter about it that you were leaving the school? Here's that exchange.
You used to be a member of a group called the Young Communist, didn't you?
Senator, are you referring to my membership in the Youth Communist Organization while I was growing up in the Soviet Union?
I don't know. I wanted to ask you that question.
Well, Senator,
There was a group called the Young Communists, and you were a member. Is that right?
I'm not exactly sure which group you're referring to.
Well, the formal name of it is the Leninist Communist Young Union of the Russian Federation, and it's also known as the Leninist Komsomol of the Russian Federation, and it's commonly referred to as the Young Communists. Were you a member?
Senator, I was born and grew up in the Soviet Union.
Yes, ma'am, but were you a member of that organization?
Everybody in that country was a member of the Komsomol, which was the Communist Youth Organization, because
you were a member?
That was a part of normal progress in school.
Have you resigned?
From the youth?
From the Young Communists?
You grow out of it with age, automatically.
Did you send them a letter, though, resigning?
Senator, this was many, many years ago. As far as I remember how the Soviet Union worked, was at certain age, you automatically stop being a member of that.
Could you look at your records and see if you can find a copy of your...
Senator Kennedy, I don't interrupt. I almost never interrupt these, but...
Well, you always interrupt me, Mr.
No, actually, I don't. Not
I
nearly as
want
many
to-
times
I
as I'd
want
like
to
to.
pursue
No,
the line of
she
questions.
renounced her Soviet citizenship.
Well, I understand that.
You're unbelievable. I mean, this is unbelievable. Matt, can you show me the letter you sent to your junior high to say that you renounce your junior high ship?
I renounce you because you used a brave as a mascot. I mean, I could do that, actually. It never really occurred to me, I must say.
What? I mean, how do I know that you even graduated?
Here's a letter that I'd sent and I kept a copy of.
I renounce my participation in the 8th grade.
And the Boy Scouts?
Associated with the 8th grade whatsoever. I'm no longer a part of that. Am I technically still in the Jesse Burkett Little League in Worcester, Mass? Because I never sent a letter to renounce it.
Yeah, I'd like to retroactively resign from Cal Ripken League.
Where is the hand wringing about this? Where is the doomsaying and what this is going to bring about? Talk about actual red baiting. This is actual red baiting.
Yep.
Can you try and find the letter that shows that you renounced your participation in elementary school?
We will see this exact same line of questioning about, you taught CRT. You did this and that to go after teachers and educators.
Without a doubt. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing it on a local level.
Yep.
All right, let's play this last clip. I haven't seen this clip, but it sounds too good. Apparently, Ryan Grimm Well, let's listen to this. Apparently, Ryan Grimm got a booster shot. I should also be clear. I got a booster shot. The information coming out from Israel, which is one of the few places where we have like a, the ability to sort of get a sense of what's happening with the boosters. The Biden administration has committed to something like, I don't know, 1 billion shots to produce for the world or something to that effect. Hundreds of millions. I think there is a legit concern that these shots, that we're not providing shots for around the world, or the mechanisms to get these shots delivered. But that said, in Israel, they did the COVID booster shots, and the third shot is 81% more effective. This is according to the Lancet. 81% more effective in preventing deaths compared to those who've only had 2 shots at least 5 months ago. So this is on top, right? It's on top of already the lower odds that you have of death or hospitalization. According to the report, the third dose of 93% effective at preventing admission into a hospital. Now, this is just one study, but this is, we don't have a lot of data at this point. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. But apparently it was offensive to Jimmy Dore because he doesn't like Ryan Grimm.
I was watching The Hill the other day, and the D.C. bureau chief of The Intercept said that he got his booster shot. Ryan Grimm said he got his booster shot because the holidays are coming up and he didn't want to transmit the virus to other people in his family. And it's like, you fucking dummy. The vaccine doesn't stop you from transmitting the virus.
You fucking dummy.
It doesn't. That you are not. He's virtue signaling. You're not protecting anyone else by getting vaccinated, you fucking propagandist at The Hill. That's the D.C. bureau chief, dumber than a fucking pothead comedian in his garage. That's the D.C. bureau chief of The Intercept spreading medical misinformation, and they, of course, won't be flagged for it because they're on the corporate fucking algorithm. And they get pushed, and they never get suppressed. But the actual accurate information on COVID will be suppressed, but their bullshit doesn't. It gets pushed. That was a complete medical misinformation Ryan Grimm from the D.C. bureau chief of The Intercept gave on The Hill on that show, saying that he got a booster shot so he didn't transmit the virus to people in his family over the holidays. That's not how the vaccination works, you fucking moron. I know that, and I'm high. Okay.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, he's high. But do you notice the sleight of hand that he does here? The vaccine does not prevent you from transmitting it if you have a breakthrough infection. The vaccine greatly, whether it's 2 shots or certainly a booster, greatly, significantly, dramatically diminishes your chance of getting infected in the first place. And if you do not have COVID, you cannot transmit COVID. It also probably, even with that said, it's also very possible that, and I don't know that we have enough data on this, frankly, it's also very possible that the same factor that keeps you from getting really sick from COVID when you're vaccinated, that the virus doesn't have the ability to replicate and build up a viral load, also could diminish just diminishes the load within your body and therefore makes you less contagious. Mm-hmm. But at the very least, we know that it reduces the amount of the likelihood that you will catch COVID. And if you have a reduced likelihood of catching COVID, you have a reduced likelihood of transmitting COVID.
I'm high, and I
don't know if he's consciously.
Sam, I got into it with Jimmy. And I told him this exact same thing. He fucking knows. He's been told this over and over again by people. He's seen this. He just stops responding when you do that.
I mean, honestly, like at one point, he's just lying for money.
Yes.
He's just lying for money. And it's embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed if I was on screen when that was happening and didn't say anything.
So would I. There's a great, I put this in Slack, a Substack actually, from our local epidemiologist, from Caitlin Jedalina, has a great blog here, but here's a section of it. Vaccinated people do not spread the virus as much as unvaccinated, not even close. Here's how it works. The very first bullet point: vaccines prevent infection in the first place. I mean, that's the big one that he will always skip over because he needs to lie, because he needs to maintain his anti-vax audience.
What's number 2? No, come back up.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
back up. Number 2 is the
you clear the virus faster. So yeah, reducing transmission among breakthrough cases. The vaccinated are contagious for far fewer days than unvaccinated, average 3 to 6 days versus 13 to 18 with Delta. We've had 3 studies provide this evidence thus far. So even if you talk about the forget the first most important part about it stops you from getting infected in the first place, it helps you clear the virus faster. So I mean, he's just lying.
What I just imagine for a moment, like, what kind of like decrepit insides do you have to have? I mean, I imagine he gets some type of like substance that helps him deal with this. I don't know what it would be.
Yeah. Well, he said he was high, so.
But imagine how sort of just corroded and decrepit you have to be inside you to know that you are saying this stuff, that you are inhibiting people from getting a booster, from getting a vaccine in some fashion, and you're just doing it for money.
Yeah.
Like, it just like, or for whatever, maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's something that, like, you know, he says he's a jagoff. Maybe this is what he masturbates to.
But it's not just him. It's all his media enablers too, that they avoid. I specifically asked Glenn Greenwald, do you think he's talking sense here? And he didn't want to actually assess the actual point.
It's so gross to contemplate. You know, I mean, it's so gross to contemplate because it's
life and death.
Yeah, exactly. You just don't know how many tragedies you're causing. And it really is just, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around. And maybe even more so because at one point he was doing this, you know, for some reasons other than his own self-aggrandizement and enrichment. It really is fascinating what must have taken place. You know, what you know, like it would be interesting to sort of like graph on a heat map, like what was going on in his brain during this time.
Dark stuff.
Masshole Seder, will the live show be streamed in the same way as the regular program? At this point, I'm not sure. I don't think that they have the upload capacity from the Wilbur, to be honest with you. But we'll see. I don't think so.
We'll try to get a recording at least.
Oh no, I would imagine we're going to get a recording. Username is required. Freedom units only. I'm a custodial artist at a Catholic elementary school, and the teachers had a conversation on CRT. They found if they were to cut anything under the umbrella of critical race theory, half the religious education would have to be removed. I found that funny and interesting. Left is best. Interesting. Only Emma fan. I only watched the show because of Emma, so you got lucky today. But I want to know why we haven't seen Bradley. Does he even exist?
Good question.
All right, let me take one more phone call. Folks, I know we have a lot of people who have been on hold for a long time. Sorry, I'm doing my best. I am doing my best. Please. Calling from a 412 area code. 412.
Oh, is this me?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, I said the same thing everybody says. This is Andrew calling from Pittsburgh.
Andrew from Pittsburgh, you are the final caller of the day.
All right. I guess the thing I was calling to talk about, it's kind of been on my mind for a bit, and it is somewhat related to what you were just talking about with the Jimmy Dore crowd. Not so much. Because it's like and you can tell me if this observation is overblown or not, but it's just something I've noticed kind of in the left crowd. And it seems to come up more and more after Bernie's loss, but like, it seems like there's a certain, and I'm not trying to like name names or start drama, but it seems like there's like a segment of the online left that like goes out of its way to be contrarian. And my pet theory is just that like a lot of these folks, especially if you're online, spend all your time just arguing with like, I guess, mainstream news outlets. And so they think like, you know, if something picks up steam in like a, you know, a CNN or whatever, well, then I'm just going to take the opposite position just because I know they're always wrong.
So what are you saying? That you think some people online are knee jerk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess it's not, it's not really much of an observation. I was just trying to like,
I mean, I think
like,
look,
I called him.
I think there's a lot of there's a lot of people in this space for whom, you know, like, and I have to say, like, you know, I didn't have to go through a lot of this because I was very fortunate in that coming from radio, one, I stumbled into radio, was basically just brought in by Janine Garofalo, had really no qualifications that would have allowed me to be there whatsoever. And I was very lucky. The only qualification I had was that she trusted me and knew that there was stuff that I could do that she wanted. And then I was able to basically, you know, had an email list and was able to launch this show and got lucky, entered in at a time where there was not that much competition. We have a ceiling on this show. I mean, you know, and we grow, but we don't grow in leaps and bounds from year to year. And so I'm particularly lucky. There's a lot of people I think who came in over the past couple of years, and I think it's, you know, they feel the heat of competition more and will sometimes try and position themselves in such a way that they will get more attention. There was a book written by, I think he like wrote the whole book, or if he edited it, I think he wrote it, by Mark Crispin Miller, who, you know, I have some issues with some of the stuff that he's done as of late, but wrote a really interesting book called Boxed In about the culture of TV, where I remember one of the big takeaways was this idea that when you're watching TV, the practice of it in and of itself makes you feel like the person on TV is important. I can't remember the dynamic, but I think that there's like, I think there's just a danger. It's one of those things like, you know, everything comes with its own drawbacks with like our YouTube culture that promotes that type of thing. I don't think it's, you know, and maybe people who are contrarian, enter into it, but I mean, you look at someone like Jimmy Dore, and I mean, I know he's stupid, but, and frankly, Tim Pool, for that matter, also stupid. I know for a fact that Tim Pool has told people like, the reason why he does the type of show he does is he doesn't have to read anything really. And it's super easy. I think there are just some people out there who are just like, I'm willing to make money at whatever expense I externalize to society. And you're not going to do that by, you need to differentiate yourself from other media outlets. Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is take a contrarian position.
And another thing to know right now is that for the first time since basically Trump announced, it's a drought for attention. Like subs aren't going up as high, patrons not going up as high. People are struggling and a lot of people haven't experienced that before and are wondering, I want to keep that growth rate up. How am I going to keep that growth rate that was so nice for the last 4 years? And people are panicking and doing crazy shit.
And you see, like, I mean, listen, I saw this in show business too. Like, I'm not going to say who it was, but there was one person I knew who she was a client of my manager, and I put her in a bit, like a live bit, you know, because I was doing stuff just like quick live bits, and I needed somebody to do it, and she couldn't act at all. Like, it had to do nothing. And I told my manager, I was like, dude, I'm telling you right now, you better just take a 7-minute reel. Don't let her audition for stuff, because, and she did quite well. She was a character. And she did quite well. And then she got a show and it failed and this and that. And then she got put onto another show that was very popular at the time. And she went up on day 1 to the Star. The show had been on for 10 years or something like that. And started giving the Star line reads. And immediately got fired. like that was the last of it. But there was like this thing, and I'm sure it happened from everywhere, but I knew people from Boston who, like, they lost all perspective. They lost all perspective. Like the desire to be a celebrity and this and that. I mean, they just lost all perspective of where they were and what their status was and what was going to happen with them. And then they freak out when anything doesn't go the way they thought it should, or they lose their minds in some weird way. And I saw that in show business, and I think that, like, that, you know, I would assume that because people are in a political space that they don't feel like they're in show business, or that these same things don't apply, and it's just not true.
Nope.
You see people who are like, I was getting, 200 subscribers a day to, followers on Twitter, and now I'm getting 5 a day. I'm being, what's the plot here? And it's just like, we've had a year or two where we were getting like 30,000 subscribers a month. And then we've had months where we're like getting 1,000 subscribers a month. Like, there's no way to really sort of like, there is no.
Well, you can kind of predict it's going to follow the election cycle.
It follows the election cycle, and then there are other things that you just can't predict. And it's just like, it is what it is. There's no like nefarious, you're not the center of the effing universe. No. It's just insanity. And that's what happens with a lot of people. So the bottom line is, dude, like, I don't know. It's not just contrarian for contrarian's sake. There's a lot of, I think, psychological stuff working for a lot of these people, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that was a good point about the, like, worrying about the subscriber numbers. I guess I hadn't thought about, like, people following those metrics as closely as they do, which, I mean, you would if that's your livelihood.
Yeah, it's true. I appreciate the call.
All right, thanks.
Bye. All right, folks, that's it for the caller portion of the show. Winnipeg Craig, was it H. John Benjamin or David Cross that lost all perspective in your anecdote? No, absolutely not. No. Nobody who is a friend. I haven't seen that happen with somebody I consider a close friend anyway. Says who? Coming from Maui, if I can finish surgical recovery in time. Oh, wow. That would be nuts. Nicole from Buffalo, would you guys ever consider having someone on like Katrina Spade or Caitlin Dowdy on the show to talk about the effort to legalize human composting in a number of states across the country? They shelved it because they didn't want to deal with anything weird during the recall election in Colorado and California. I'd love to see talk about the funeral industrial complex and its pushback on green alternatives to traditional burial and cremation. Send me an email. I've never heard about any of that, to be honest with you. Lori's guy. Hey, Sam, what would be your recommendation for the best? Oh, we did that. I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button there. Dago Lefty. Sam, the winner of your distance contest comes up on stage to play the part of Steven Crowder during a reenactment with your debate with him. That could be fun. All right. 10 more. Rand Paul's neighbor just sent in my email with my travel distance, 3,025 miles from Seattle to Boston. What's the prize? Better not be some crappy Boston apples. We'll see. Boston Bernie bro. Where's all my walking to the Wilbur folks at? Satanic boy, Kyle Rittenhouse, the weepy cop simping Frank Castle. Judy Giuliani. Update on the Chilean presidential election. After voting 80% in favor of a new constitution last year, the far-right candidate Cast beat the leftist Boric. There will be a runoff election December 19th. Low turnout compared to the constitutional plebiscite, though. Hopefully turnout will be better in December. Cast is anti-abortion, anti-LGBT rights, anti-immigrant rights, anti-indigenous. Insanity. Oy. Wyoming Ryan. I heard in the Arbery case live this morning that aggravated assault begins when the gun gets pointed at a subject. Sure seems like carrying around an AR in a tense scene would be modified to fit inside that aggravated assault law fairly easily in a less gun-wild country. Yeah, I mean, who knows what... I don't know what the Wisconsin laws are, but... Late stage Tom. Gerrymandering doesn't only affect the balance of power, it impacts the type and style of politician elected by protecting seats. Fair enough. Mark's Marnix from PA. Why does Gorka always sound like a text-to-speech generator?
I'd love Gorka to not narrate my books.
That would be amazing. Jinzo Abbey. Glad people are finally demanding accountability from a person responsible for shitty conservative Democrats making the country worse. Sam Seder. Yo, what the F happened to Max Blumenthal and why does he suck so much now? I don't understand what's going on with that. Jay Shivone. Can you imagine the segregationist organization Senator John Kennedy had been affiliated with his young person as an adult? White communist. The caller about Ahmaud Arbery doing suspicious things is pushing white supremacist propaganda. Security cameras previously captured other people in that unfinished house. Different people would stop there to drink water, to rest, or just for curiosity. Arbery was a habitual avid jogger in that area. The coroner testified in court that Arbery had absolutely nothing on his person when shot dead, not even a phone. The actual homeowner testified that he was not concerned about Arbery. I know it. Like I say, I don't know the facts of the case enough, and maybe that's the only reason why to look into that, just so that people can't push fake narratives like that. But all right, two more. Observer, non-drugs mean they don't require FDA approval and are mostly ineffectual or at least harmless. See nutritional supplements, CBD, etc. And the final IM of the day, Dolink. Yes, you can pass COVID on. Hotz says the vaccine kills it in blood, but they aren't potent enough to kill it in the nasal passages. There's no doubt you can pass it on. It's harder to get. And apparently also you get rid of it more. So your likelihood of passing it on is lower. And now I'm going to take the real final IM of the day. Comes from Binder Dad. Around 1960, there was a new two-family home development being constructed around the corner from where I live. My mom would take her wheelbarrow to it, fill it with fresh topsoil, and bring it back to her rose garden. Thankfully, no one hunted her down and caused her bodily harm. Folks, if I'm not here tomorrow and it's just Emma, I'll try and call in. But have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Be careful. Matt, Bradley, great job today. See you soon.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,